Evgeniy is also joining shortly.
Yes, I think he's also coming. So yeah, Boyan and Evgeniy will start with no backend, no problem. Flutter and Firebase to the rescue because and today they're also going to be to the rescue for us with the agenda. So thank you guys for tuning in.
Glad to be of service.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, let's give it a try, share your screen, present yourselves, tell us about your new project. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, let's get the technical stuff out of the way first.
Yeah, just 1 second to let me share my screen. Okay.
And
it's going to be quicker, I promise.
You promised.
Okay, cool. I think we have a stable connection here and we have our presentation on our screens.
Perfect. Yes, we do see it.
Awesome. So, hello everyone. Nice meeting you once again. I have. It's a pleasure to actually see that there are some people that we have already seen in the previous sessions. And thank you again, GDG Bulgaria, for this opportunity to talk in front of such an amazing audience and in front of you. So today, what are we going to talk about? We are going to talk about how Flutter and Firebase are coming to the rescue and why having a no backend is actually not a problem with that. But first, a little bit about ourselves. So Boyan, please.
So, hello everyone. You know me and Evgeniy from our last appearances here. So I'm gonna be a bit shorter this time. So my name is Boyan Iliev. I'm a bit of a technology and IT dinosaur. I've been working in the industry for about 14 years now. I don't even remember. And I've been mostly focused on mobile development throughout my career. And for the last 2 years, with Evgeniy, we're doing a lot of Flutter development. This is our main focus right now. Evgeniy, would you like to say a few words as well?
Yes. So pleased to meet you all once again. My name is Evgeniy Yanev, and I'm not such a dinosaur as Boyan. But still, I have been doing mostly mobile development for around 10 years now. And as he said, in the last couple of years, really focused on Flutter. So that's it about me. Let's start with the presentation. It's the more important and the more interesting thing about this presentation. So I know you know that sound. Yes, Flutter and Firebase. It's a real match. But why? We already know that actually Flutter rocks. We have talked numerous times about this, and having all of you here today actually shows that indeed Flutter rocks. But why Firebase? Firebase.
So why Firebase indeed? It's a great way to hook up a backend to a mobile app. You don't have to write tons of configuration code. You also don't have to use Docker or any VMs or complicated deployment strategies, or even actually don't know much about deployment at all, really. It lets you also solve a bunch of tough programming issues on the front end, as you might have also experienced before, like security, data synchronization, authentication, and stuff like that. Which, believe me, if you're doing from scratch on your own, it's not that trivial, especially if you involve all the social platform providers. And last but not least, it has the added benefit of scale, which is not always guaranteed if you're writing your own backend implementation, and not all technologies scale all that well. So that's like really great. What are we going to talk about in this presentation? I will give you a quick rundown. So it's gonna talk a little bit about how you're gonna set up and use Firebase through the command line interface. we're going to talk about a little bit about authentication, Flutter Fire, and Firestore for your database and storage needs and whatever you're going to do as data on your app. So first of all, what you're going to need to do is to head over to the Firebase page and set up your first account and first app. In our case, it's the awesome demo app that we have set up for you today. And once you've done that, you need to do a little bit of groundwork as well, which is a bit more technical, but bear with us. So first of all, to use Flutter Fire, you need to set up Firebase CLI. And to do that, there's a number of ways. Here we're going to use a simple bash command with curl. You can also use npm if you would like, but here we're going to execute this, and it's going to install the Firebase CLI for us. Afterwards, you need to log in, and this is very convenient. Once you fire the Firebase login command, it's going to open up a browser tab and log you in. It's way nicer than you would think. And afterwards, just check all your setup and that everything is good. You can execute the Firebase project list command, and it's gonna actually, at least it should link your awesome project that you have just created. So you should succeed and see this message, and you'll be all set up on your journey. So what next? What's Flutter Fire? It's a set of plugins which would allow you to connect your app to Firebase. And what you need to do next is kind of actually run a bunch of commands as well. So you need to activate your Flutter Fire CLI now that you have installed the Firebase CLI. It's a bit of groundwork, but you have to do it. And finally, we get to the good stuff. When you run Flutter Fire configure, it's going to do a really awesome thing, which deserves a screenshot from the command line, actually, and you can see the amazing thing that it's going to do here. You don't have to do all the setup for each and every deployment target that you have. Since we're using Flutter here, this command will actually create the configuration for our targets, such as Android, iOS, Mac OS, and web for free with, like, I think the execution is like 8 seconds, but it was like 2, I think. So it's very, very fast and neat thing to do. And that's pretty much it. Oh, yeah, one last thing, actually. You need to add this initialize app before you run your actual app, and this will configure your Firebase, and you're well on your way to using everything that we're going to talk about next. So Evgeniy now is going to run us through authentication and tell us why this is awesome.
Hi guys, once again, thank you, Boyan. So we are going to talk about a little bit about Firebase authentication. So why do we need actually authentication in our applications at all? First of all, authentication provides a customized user experience, which means that I can go into my application, my newly created awesome demo application. I can log in with my credential details, and instantly I can go to my profile page where I can see my profile photo, my email, my name. I can edit those, and maybe I can create actually the application based on my location to show something else, based on my language or something else. So I need to know that data. This is why providing a customized user experience is really important. Second, we have keeping the data secured. With Firebase and Flutter, I really don't care how this is handled because everything comes out of the box. But please believe me, the Google team and the Flutter team, they have put a really amounts of effort to keep the user's data secured. Third, we have an easy-to-use SDK. In the next few slides, you're actually going to see how easy it is in numerous ways to actually use the authentication SDK. And of course, something that Boyan has already talked about, it's planet scale. So it's not localized, it's globalized. Now, let's move. What does Firebase actually provides? As you can see on that beautiful screenshot that we have, is Firebase provides a number of different ways to authenticate in our applications. And most of those are actually authentication methods that we are really used to as users. which includes Google Sign-in, Facebook, Twitter, GitHub. And of course, you can use the pretty convenient way to just put in your email and a secure password. But last but not least is you can use your own authentication. Let's say you have already set up your own authentication, which is really secure, and you just want to use Firebase with it as well. So you have this option as well. Now, let's move from actually how to implement authentication with Flutter and Firebase. One of the ways is actually is something that I have named manual authentication. Later on, you're going to see what is the non-manual way. But now, let's focus on the manual authentication. In order to use the manual authentication, you have to add the Firebase Auth dependency to your project with this simple command. And having this, this gives you all the options that you can think of. We are going to start with the authentication state. This is a pretty handy function, outstate changes, which tracks when a user is signed in or when the user has signed out. Another handy function is ID token changes. ID token changes tracks both when the user has signed in and signed out, but also when there is a change in the current user's token. An existing user session gets its ID token refreshed after another token expires, but also an ID token may be forced refreshed by calling a specific function in your Flutter application. And then we have user changes. And as you can see, we have more and more capabilities with every next function. I promise this is the last one. So you have user changes, which includes signed in, signed out events, user token events, but also when there are changes in the user data, which includes updating the email, the password, the phone number, or any information in your profile. What does authentication gives us out of the box? First, we have persistent authentication state across app restarts or page reloads. I think that we, as users, most of all, probably we are using Facebook. And imagine that each time you want to open your phone and open Facebook, you have to sign in once again. So this would be a horrible user experience. With authentication from Firebase and Flutter, this comes out of the box and it works without doing absolutely anything. As I said in the slide, it is enabled by default on the mobile platforms, Android and iOS. And yeah, unfortunately, you cannot configure that. But the good thing is that at least on the web platform, yeah, you can configure it and you can disable it. A little bit about the sign-in methods. It is really important part. The anonymous sign-in. Even though many applications do not require the user to explicitly sign into an application, it is important that you are able to uniquely identify your users, right? For both analytical, security reasons, and some not so good reasons. Anonymous sign-in provides an extra layer of security using Firebase, Firestore, real-time database, or even an external API, since you're able to detect whether a request comes from an authenticated user. And of course, then you have email and password registration and sign-in, which you're going to see in our live demo, and email link authentication, which is pretty handy thing. And of course, we have already talked about the third-party sign-in methods such as Google, Apple, Facebook, Twitter, GitHub, and then phone number. Now, let's see how easy it's actually to sign in your Flutter application. Of course, you need to add a new dependency, which is the Google sign-in with the latest version, which is right now is 4.5.1. But having the code on the right, don't look at the code in details. The idea is that having these 15 lines actually gives you all the needed code to use Google sign-in into your application. The last few lines are important. The Firebase Auth instance sign-in with credentials actually is going to give you the user credentials for your user. Next, this is the non-manual way of using authentication in your Flutter application, and this is the Flutter Fire UI, which yet is in beta version, but I have used it in several applications, and I haven't seen an issue so far. What is Flutter Fire UI? First, let's see how to install it. You can, of course, install it again with just one line, Flutter Fire UI dependency. And what does this give you? It gives you, first of all, ready-to-use screens. Yes, whole screens, not just widgets that you put in your screens. What is a screen though? This is a fully functional, pre-styled and customizable widget, which offers a complete authentication experience. I mean complete. This is sign in, register, profile, forgot password, and so on. And let's see how to actually use a sign-in screen in our application. Later on in our demo, I'm going to show you how the register screen looks like. So the sign-in screen, the highlighted area here, the sign-in screen with an empty array of provider configs is actually all you need to show a sign-in screen in your application. And that's it. You just need to check for your current user's state. If the user is not signed in, I just return the sign-in screen. And otherwise, I can instantly go into my application. But what about the empty providers that you had? Well, let's fill in some information there. Here, we can put all the providers that we have already talked about. In my application, in the demo application, we have used only email provider configuration, but you can put any providers that you want. So this means Google provider configuration, as well as Apple provider configuration, and so on and so on. Of course, keep in mind that before adding those providers in your screens, you need to enable them from the Firebase console, which is like 2 clicks with your mouse. And having this, you're going to see a sign-in screen in your application, which actually looks pretty good and is pretty handy for MVP projects, because all of this, it takes you around 5 minutes to set up and show this screen, which is actually working. And you can authenticate your users using either email and password or Google sign-in. But what about, I don't want this screen. It's too ugly for me. Okay, we can do it. We can do it and build a custom UI using views, widgets, or controllers. How to do it? Well, let's build a new screen. Let's build a new screen, a new custom sign-in screen. Let's move to the right here. As you can see, we have just created a custom sign-in widget, which returns a scaffold of custom email sign-in form. But what is the custom email sign-in form? Well, the custom email sign-in form looks pretty much like this. We have just stateless widget, which returns an authentication flow builder, and you pass in an email flow controller. There are different types of flow controllers for the different uses. In our current scenario, we are going to use email and password. Then what you need to do is actually build your UI. As you can see, with this is pretty simple UI. You have just 2 text fields for your email and password, then a button, and pressing that button, you just invoke the set email and password function of the controller object that you receive. And absolutely that's it. What happens next? Well, I want to show a progress. That's okay. I just need to monitor whether the state is signing in. If it's signing in, I show a progress. And once I'm signed in, or whether the state is signed in, I can go into my application, or in this case, I go straightly to my profile screen. And that was it. This is building a custom UI, a custom sign-in screen, using the predefined controllers that you can use from the Flutter Fire UI. As we have seen, the authentication that we can use with Firebase and Flutter and Flutter Fire UI is pretty easy. You can build your own interfaces. You can use the Flutter open source UI for the predefined screens, and the SDK is really easy to use. So now Boyan is going to talk about Cloud Firestore.
Yep. So what is Firestore? It's a flexible, scalable, NoSQL Cloud DB. That's a lot of buzzwords, but what does it actually mean? It means that you have some awesome benefits of keeping your data in sync across client apps for free. And you have a lot of cool stuff you can play with, such as you would expect from a regular database, like queries, CRUD operations, online and offline data support, security for free, and actually much more stuff, which we actually explain in excruciating detail in the next few slides. So I suggest we blast through them really quickly. What you need to do to use this is add the Cloud Firestore to your project, which is by running this one-line command. This is how you access your Firestore instance, and which we will be using for all our commands and all our operations here in the next few screens. Actually, I suggest we blast through all of these collection documents, adds, and CRUD operations, since we're developers here and we know how all that works. So actually, we can the more interesting part, actually, such as serialization and like why we would use converter classes. Yeah. The next few slides are about adding data to our instances, and with a few simple examples here. We have the read operation, and we have two types: one-time read, which is using future to link up with our data, and we also have stream. We can also return a stream from our instance, which is the next slide. We can use the snapshot here, and we can return a stream which will detect all the changes to our collection, and it will just automatically sync up our data. So yeah, we can skip this as well. Yeah, we can use the docs property to return a list of our docs, and we can access all of our fields in our snapshot using the docs command. We can also check if our collection snapshot exists with the exists command, with the exists method rather. If our document snapshot has any data, we can use data methods to access it actually, which is illustrated here. So queuing is another important thing. It functions much as reading collections. It has the same functions. It has a one-time, and you can also subscribe to a query in the same manner. We, as I said, everything that we would expect from regular SQL queries, like filtering, which is displayed here. And we can also filter by multiple criteria using arrays. We can do limiting. We can do ordering. We can do, this is something cool that you can also do. You can use start and end cursors, which you can specify by start at end at, so you can apply your ordering or whatever you want to do specific index. You can also not use indexes. You can use an actual snapshot to apply this. And yeah, this is an interesting thing. Actually, Evgeniy, you might want to shed a little light on this thing. This is for the converter class, and Evgeniy is gonna tell us how this works.
Yes, sure. So by default, maybe you weren't really able to see, but by default, the Firestore references manipulate just a map, which is with keys of strings, and values are dynamic objects. The downside is that we lose type safety. And what we can use is actually we can use with converter function, which will modify the methods for adding or querying, and once again, they're going to be type safe. So how are we going to do this? A common usage of with converter is, let's say you want to query some data from your Firebase storage from Firestore, and you have an entity like movie. Okay, you have this entity movie with a couple of fields like title and genre, and you have created a really nice function, factory function from JSON, which converts your map of string and object, JSON object to the movie object, and then you have, of course, to JSON because you want to deserialize as well. What you can do with this with converter is actually when creating a reference to your collection movies, you can just pass in a couple of Lambda functions to the with converter function. as you can see, we are just saying when converting from Firestore and you receive a snapshot, you can just say movie from JSON snapshot.data. And when it's doing the opposite, you just say movie to JSON, and that's it. What does this give us? Well, actually, this gives us a lot. As you can see, when we are doing querying the data with where genre is equal to sci-fi, then you do get, you're going to get a couple of documents. But what you can do is you can actually now add, when adding a movie, you can just not add a map of string and dynamic objects, but you can instead add a movie, which is the normal way you would expect to add an entity in your application. In your Flutter applications, most of the times, we work with real objects and not just maps. So this is a more natural way for the developer to work with the Firebase instance. And also the opposite. When getting a movie, let's say the example at the bottom, when getting a movie with the ID 42, why 42? Someone can say. When getting a movie with 42, we get an actual movie instance right away when we say snapshot.data. We don't get a map of string and dynamic, but we get a movie, which is awesome. Now, Boyan, updating documents.
Yeah, we're also going to breeze through these as well. As you would expect, you can do an update in the absolute same manner that we've done all of our CRUD operations. You can use the update command to update a document, such as you can see here. The one thing that is worth mentioning here is that you can use you can update deeply nested values with the dot annotation, and as you can see at the bottom of the screen, you can do info address zip code to update the zip code, which is really useful. So you can use that as well. So one really cool thing that is also worth mentioning is field values. So we have support for that, and you can also store timestamps, geopoints, and blobs, as you will see in the next few examples, which is actually really cool. You can commands to store a geopoint, for instance, and you can use the geopoint class, just pass longitude and latitude. You can, you can store images, which is really, really useful. In this example, you can load an image from your assets folder, for instance. Then, as you can see, you turn it into a byte array, and then you can write it as a blob into your Firestore, which is like really cool. You can also handle errors and just, you can just store it. Of course, we cannot finish without deleting stuff, which we will see in the next example. You can just use delete as you have used read and update so far. It's really, really simple by using the delete method. And if you need to delete a reference value, you can see that in the next example. You can use actually, this is a bit trickier. You can, to delete property, you can use the update command and use the field value delete methods to delete a property, which is also really cool. There are a lot of other things we can talk about. This is a really big topic. There are also transactions, which you can sync with, are always going to sync to the latest data. You can also use batch operations, which are very, very important. You can use multiple writes in a single batch, which actually could be a combination of set, update, or delete operations, which is like really important because you might want to execute all of these, and if something in the middle fails, you want to drop everything, which is like really important. You get security for free. You get offline data for free, and there are a bit more complicated topics that we're not going to cover in this talk. And now probably let's hope that we have prayed to the demo gods today, as Evgeniy is going to show you a little bit of what we've done with all of this that we talked about so far.
Hopefully. Bear with me, the live demos. Okay, so basically we have created a really small demo application here, which is going to track your expenses as a user. And there are just a couple of screens in the application, but we're going to get through them one by one. The first screen is actually the login screen in your application. And as you can see, it's actually a pretty customized screen. The login is with username, password, you have a forgot your password button, login, or maybe you don't have an account. But this screen here is actually using all the custom UI controllers that I have talked about in the authentication slides. Let's say that I don't have an account and I want to create one. I want to click on the sign up. And here, yep, the UI is a little bit broken, so you're going to forgive this. Okay, I'm going to put some passwords. And hopefully when I click sign up, yay, and I'm inside the application. And I have a total of 0 because I don't have any expenses up until now. So now let's see one screen that is predefined, and I have used the whole screen without doing absolutely anything. This is a profile screen. If I click the profile icon here on the top, I'm instantly prompted with the profile screen. And actually I can put in my name. Okay, let's do it. And I haven't done anything about this, but I have already a profile screen with a sign out button, with the sign in methods that I have used, with a delete account button, which is great. I don't have a profile picture because I haven't used another sign in method like Google sign in, for instance. But let's go back. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new expense. Expense title cake. How much does a cake cost? Let's say 20. We don't have currencies here. This is an imaginary world without currencies. So let's say it's just 20. And actually I'm going to press OK. And now I have a new expense, which is a cake. The amount is 20. And the total, as you have seen, is also 20. There are a couple of things that have happened here. First of all, when I have pressed a new expense, I have used the Firestore add method to add a new expense to my account. Then I have actually used something pretty neat, and these are the Lambda functions. We haven't talked in this talk about the Lambda functions that Firebase provides, but actually what has happened, that I have uploaded a Lambda function that calculates the total amount that I have for all my expenses, which means that if I add a new expense here now, let's say bread, and its amount is 250. You can see the total amount has increased, and all this happens. I'm going to share the GitHub repository for this code, but all this happens immediately. I'm using only streams for the expenses and the future builder for the total, and that's it. I don't do anything. But you're going to ask, where are these checkboxes for? These checkboxes are for when you actually finish with that expense. Let's say you're done with it, and if I click on this one, I'm done. If I click on this one, I'm done, and I have a total of 0. So basically, this is our demo application, which is using everything that we have talked about in our presentation, and a few more things like the Lambda functions, and yeah, that's it. I think actually the demo went pretty well. No crashes. Everything is good. So I'm going to now move to the next one, which is the really nice thank you slide. And now I think that we have a couple of minutes for any questions. Sofia can say if we do have time or not.
Yeah, we have one question and we have time for it. If anybody else is willing to ask, please do so in the Q&A section. So we have a question from Zwati. What's your experience with Firebase, and aren't they a better starting point when developing an app, since we don't have to pay for the services until we have something ready?
Yeah, I can talk about this one. And actually, this application that I have just shown for the demo, I have set it up for basically a day and a half, everything. And this is all because we are using all the predefined stuff that we come with Firebase. The cool thing about the Firebase simulators, I haven't used those up until actually a few days ago, and it's pretty handy. You can set up the Firebase simulators with one command in your terminal. I think it's Firebase start, and I was a little bit struggling with actually writing the Lambda functions because they were in JavaScript, and JavaScript is a little bit different than the normal languages that I'm used to. No offense. But otherwise, using the Firebase simulator worked pretty well. I was able to actually test my Lambda functions locally, and only once I was ready, then I deployed my Lambda functions. And unfortunately, you have to set up a payment plan in your Firebase account if you're going to use a Lambda functions. But if you're not going past a certain limit, it's not going for a budget at all. But otherwise, a really nice experience with the Firebase emulators.
Okay, one more question from Lazar. If you decide to migrate to your own backend, will you have access to the database for easy migration?
I can answer to that, Boyan, if you're okay, once again.
Yep, sure.
So thank you, Lazar. It's a really nice question. Actually, we have done this for a project that we have done maybe a year ago, something like this. Initially, we started with Firebase, and all our data was there. But then, because of some other conditions that were not related of all the cool stuff that Firebase gives us, we decided to move to Amazon. And yeah, migrating to the Amazon services was possible, but I wouldn't say it is easy, which is absolutely normal. I mean, if I am a service provider like Firebase, I wouldn't make it easy to move to Amazon, and vice versa, which is absolutely normal, but it is possible. Yes. And we have another question. Where is the best place to check for additional information about Firebase functions? To be honest, I have used only the official Firebase documentation. So this is the first place I would go if I want to understand a little bit more. Is there a way to import data in Firestore database? And so basically there are two types of Firestore. You mean Firestore database? And to be honest, I haven't tried this, and I can check and let you know afterwards. But I haven't imported like in big quantities data to Firebase data store. I know that there are plugins for BigQueries and so on, so this might be possible to do it in the opposite way. But I can check and let you know.
I can jump in here just to mention something. For importing data, you don't like there are two options. You can import entries one by one, and also you can do batches. I'm not sure what was the limit of the batch, but let's say it's something like 5,000. So yeah, if you write a script, like pretty simple script, you can use the Firebase admin SDK, I believe it's called, which is like the Node.js module, and you can import whatever you want. So you can parse CSV, JSON files, everything, and just import it in batches. And if you import the data with batches, you will pay less, because otherwise, if you import everything one by one, this will be like charged more if you go above the limit, of course. But still, if you want to save money, you can do batches.
I can also say about the batches, I think the limit is 500 documents per batch. I don't think you can add 5,000 at once.
Okay, yeah, my bad. But still, it's kind of shortcutting if you want to.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. I don't think we have any more questions.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Boyan and Evgeniy. You were amazing once again. Okay, so now we will be able to give the stage to Majid. We were testing it out on a different in a different backstage event. So Majid, welcome. And sorry everyone else for the delay. Now that we are looking forward for the architectural thinking on Flutter state management. Let's go.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the both speaker before me. So they, I think, are kind of like lifesaver. So thank you very much, both of you. I'm really sorry, everyone. I absolutely have no idea what has happened. So I just reset all the permissions on my computer, gave it again, restart my computer, and now I am with you again. So, well, I don't know what has happened, but anyway, luckily I'm here again. So let's get it started. Architectural thinking. So, well, architecture, state management is probably one of the most controversial topics in Flutter ecosystem. And as your project is growing and you have more backlog, more, features and things like that to implement, then you might need to think about like, oh, what should I choose as my state management? And a lot of time people are mixing up state management with an architecture of an application, or at least like having a pattern, a proper pattern on the application. So today I'm trying to tell you about architectural thinking, like how an architect think, and Flutter state management in general, the options and the basics around it, the fundamentals. And we talk about architectural characteristic. We try to apply those characteristics to state management packages, and at the end, make a decision which one is better, at least for the application that I have here. So I was introduced in the beginning, but let me try one more time. My name is Majid. I am a GD for Flutter and Dart and a passionate Flutter community leader. And I do a lot of things for Flutter community, especially including Flutter Vikings. If you have not heard about it, you may search and find the next conference is in person in Oslo. Hopefully, I will see you soon. I also been working as solution architect in the last 2 years, and that's the reason I tried to have this topic today for you. So, architectural thinking. So, technically, architectural thinking is, well, thinking with a purpose, like thinking how the best, like, articulate a complex issue, solve a problem, make a different decisions, and and at the end, like, have a proper, let's say, solution for your issue. But what does it mean? Like, let's talk about it a little bit more in depth. First of all, if you have not read this book yet, and if you are interested about software architecture in general, I would recommend you to take a look at Fundamentals of Software Architecture. And this is a fantastic book, and a lot of things that I am talking about in the first part of the presentation is coming from this book. So there are three key points in this book that I can highlight here. The first one is the architecture trades-off. Like, everything in an architecture perspective is a trade, has a trade-off. Okay, we're going to talk about it shortly, but there is another thing that is very important when we are going to make decisions is like business drive. Well, I also added here team drives, because then like making a decision about state management specifically is a team decision. This is also very important that we kinda translate all the problems into the architecture concerns, right? So, in other words, like both business, like in this case, it must be your product owners and the developers. They must have the same understanding of the issue and vice versa. And at the end of the day, like having a breadth of knowledge while maintaining the depth of some certain of the knowledge is also a key for architecture. But let's see how it's affecting us. Trades-off. So perhaps you've seen this airplane or aircraft before. So this is the most common one probably that we see today, right? It's like maybe this one is the Boeing 737 or whatever it is. Like they have the engines below the wing, and well, we see that almost every time you travel. But there are a couple of other ones as well. Like for example, we have this one that the engine is on top of the wing, and one of the reason that one of the advantages of being this kind of layout is to leveraging the something in aviation called STOL, or it stands for kind of short takes off and landing, like when like you need to quickly takes off and land. And there is another one, like, so you might not have seen that quite common. This one that the engines are embedded. The question now comes is like, which one is better then? Which one should I choose? Well, the answer definitely is, well, let's take a look at some of the, criteria here. If you look at the criteria, we see that, well, it says, so we have the safety, structural strength, and maintenance as some of the benefits. And if we're talking about these three difference, it looks like that the one that has engine below has, well, the safest one apparently, and it gives the best structural strength because we can add more and more, engines and bigger engines. And in fact, the maintenance is much easier because it's closer to the ground. But there are other factors too, like aerodynamic, cost, ground clearance, where although like having those engines on the, at the bottom of the, wing is giving some benefits, they have some also cost involved and some problems over there, including like the maintenance problem. The maintenance is because it's closer to ground, it absorbs most dust and, things like that. And that makes your the lifespan of the engine even shorter and costly. But then now we know to like couple of different aspects, then I think now we can answer the questions, which one is better. Well, it depends, right? We say, for example, for the short takes off and for let's say landing, well, probably you need to have those, engine on top. And that's exactly what we're going to talk in the next step about state management. And hopefully I can give you some insight over there, which one you should choose for your next project. Another thing here is that the technical breadth. So there's an architecture. So you need to know stuff that you don't know. That is the technical breadth. You need to widen that part as much as you can. You need to expose yourself and understand exactly what's going on, and you at least you don't know, while you're still keeping some technical depths to your knowledge. You still have something, something very in depth. Let me ask you a question, maybe in the chat right now. Tell me, who has heard about triple pattern or segmented state pattern? Quickly, write in the chat if you have heard about it. 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Well, I asked this question several times, and many people doesn't know, and that's about technical breadths. So that's what I'm talking about. In fact, if you're exposing yourself to the Flutter documentation and go to the options under state management, the last one as of now that I'm presenting is triple pattern or segmented state pattern. You can read about it more. So you need to know these options at least. As an architect, this is very important. Let's now talk about Flutter state management. We talked about like state management, and we say that this is one of the most crucial part because, well, many times it seems like developers tend to architect their application based on what they choose for their state management as well, or what is providing that state management to the application for creating the architecture. But, well, and it's also one of the most complex issues in building any applications. I give you an example here. I wanted to build an MJ Coffee app for some stakeholder, propose Flutter to someone, and I just wanted to do something very quickly to show how powerful is Flutter. Here is the case. So I had a login page, I had a list of the coffees, details, sign out, profile, a support page, and add to cart and checkout. Very simple and typical application. I definitely use Firebase just because it was faster and I needed to do a bunch of other things over there, right? But let's take a look at that. How could I manage my state? Well, I could have, maybe per screen one state or one state for all the screens. Which one? I don't know. Well, it depends what I want to do, right? But let's take a look at a little bit to the depths of the state. And when we're talking about the state, then what are those states in Flutter at least? And how can you, which part of these states are we talking about when we say state management? So in Flutter, you need to ask two questions usually from yourself. When it comes to the states, you say a single widget is going to have a state and you want to manage it there only in one widget. That's the one that we call it in Flutter ephemeral state. So a temporary state. Or you have some type of state that all widgets or some widgets are going to use it. So you share some state, and that is going to be app state. And choosing a Flutter library perhaps is for the app state part, where you are going to manage the state, for your application. There is absolutely nothing wrong to also have a ephemeral state for just one widget. You don't need to just use a state management for everything, right? One package, I mean. But by looking at the options, here is where the thing's getting more complex. Then I looked at the packages and I see that, we have, a bunch of them here. That's the one that is already on Flutter state management options in Flutter documentation. If you actually go and search a bit more, we realize that, we have way more than that. We have like over 30 state management and with different criteria and different approaches. Well, that is good and bad. The good part is that it shows how vibrant is the community and they're solving the problem. The bad thing is that it's too many of them. I don't have time to test all of them. I just need something that works good. So one thing that I could do is, I could quickly go and segment or make a category based on different approaches. So quickly looking at the list of state management and some of the definition on the description, I realized these state management either are a wrapper based on Flutter features or they're following some kind of reactive programming approach, or they kind of following the functional programming approach. So an example of each are presented on the screen, right? You have like Riverpod, you have block in the second category, and the third one, you have Redux or async Redux. Okay, that is by itself is good. So at least I know that, in my application, I probably don't have too much reactive programming. I probably don't have too much streams. Then maybe I should look at the other ones. Or, maybe I don't want the functional approach that much or a single, state, single source of truth for state, then maybe I can look at the wrapper because I want to be as close as possible to Flutter features. Let's call it that way. That is already a good indication. But that's not enough. I want to narrow down my list as much as possible. Well, there are a bunch of things that is coming here. Well, for example, I can add my team criteria to that and maybe myself criteria. So I can say, well, I'm going to go with packages that has code coverage over 70%, has a good documentation. It follows, it does one thing. It actually just does one thing, and that is state management, in fact. And well, also maybe if it does a dependency injection is a good plus, but it's not mandatory. Is it active or not? How is the maintainer? Widely used or not? Like adding a bunch of criteria here. Even the complexity. Well, we're going to talk about that in a few slides. Bear with me. So this is already good because I can, based on this and the previous categories, then I can narrow down my list to a few of the options, maybe 4 or 5 of them. So I don't need to go and check out the 30. But how can you narrow down? Just look at the examples, look at the source code, look at the documentation. That already gives you some indications. You even don't need to try all of them. And another thing afterwards is you need to make sure, if you're talking like as an architect, you need to make sure you have kind of a translation map between your language, business language, and maybe the developer's language, right? When we're talking about, let's say, agility, maybe when you want to talk about it, why did you choose this one? You said this makes us more agile. But what does it mean exactly for business or product owner? Oh, it means that we can definitely develop our feature faster, get to the market faster, or we can test it, debug it faster. So having this type of, table to give us this language, to translate that based on the characteristic of the architecture, including a scalability, adaptability, the architecture loves these elitist words. So simplicity, is it simple or not? Like the simplicity for what does it mean for business, for example? Well, it's simple. That means I can spend less time to pick it up. I can continue adding more things. I can easily debug it. That means time and budget. Well, it saves some time, some budget for sure. And that means maybe, I can, in my team, it's easier to onboard developers for that. So now I can pick up some of the characteristics. Let's go for at least 7 of them. I'm going to make a base. So for my comparison, well, the simplest thing that I can go with is definitely Flutter built-in state management, right? You have a stateful widget, you have set a state, and so on and so forth. Well, that's probably the simplest approach. It's built in. A lot of documentations are around that, so you find everything that you want. But does it mean it's also scalable? Like, well, maybe not, because when you go for, when you're thinking about how can I use this set of state, then does it mean if I go to a widget tree down to my child, maybe 5 level down, then should I pass this state from there to top, like passing down and up the state? How should I change that? Quickly you realize, oh, that seems to be a little bit complex later and probably makes the maintainability of my application later harder. But what is the perfect choice for this then? When can I use that? Well, use it when you have an ephemeral state. We talked about ephemeral state. When you have something in one widget, particularly widget, nowhere else, just use it there. Or as I said, maybe if you have a simple project, you have just a few pages or a few widgets, not even like maybe 100 widgets. So it's maybe easy to maintain with, set state. The best thing about this is that that makes it agile for sure. Also, maybe slightly productive, but then also you are as close as possible to Flutter framework. That makes it easy for you to upgrade and do stuff like that. But what is the next option on the list based on the factors and criteria that we mentioned in the previous slide a couple of slides before. Provider change notifier. Well, that is probably one of the solutions that you find many places, articles, because this is one of the oldest solution in Flutter ecosystem since the beginning, almost. And that's the reason you see a lot about it. But I have to tell you something. The author of Provider told me that if people are trying to start something with Provider, they should stop and start using Riverpod instead, because he's going to put his effort behind Riverpod mostly. And as he said, Riverpod is like Provider 2.0. So please consider that. Therefore, I'm not going to spend time here because I'm not going to start any project with Provider anymore. I'm going to go with Riverpod. There's one difference between Riverpod and Provider is that like Riverpod comes as a complete solution. So Provider was initially just a wrapper around inherited widget for making the dependency injection easier. But Riverpod comes as a complete solution. So that makes it, well, is it simple enough? Maybe or maybe not. Compared to the base that we talked about, it's not as simple as it should be. Well, compared to that one, but it comes with extra features that me as a developer would love that, like the stability suites that it's provided by the package, or it looks like by the promises that is making on the documentation page, at least if you have not even tried the package, it's going to be very scalable and maintainable. And a bunch of other, comparison here based on our base. So it gives me a feeling of like probably I can use Riverpod for most application, especially if my teams are consist of median or senior developers, especially, or if I don't need that much reactive programming thing. So then it comes to another one, the list, that is block. Block as a pattern, not but as a package, Flutter block. So, well, the first thing that the block documentation tells me is that, oh, this is kind of like a reactive programming pattern. So it seems it's using stream quite heavily and, a lot of things around it. And well, by looking at the pattern itself, it looks like it probably compared to the base one, is not very simple. You need to have some time to understand how things are working. There are some boilerplate code, and I know there is a qubit out of that. It makes it a bit better, but still, there are, things that makes it a bit harder to work. Maybe not as productive as I could be in the beginning, especially. But, maybe in long run, I can. But that's very important for projects when they are onboarding and offboarding developers quite a lot. And we're gonna have, but it looks like it can be a very scalable solution for me, especially if I have a lot of live data in my application coming and going. Like if you are doing an IoT solution, or if you are doing a WebSocket, implementation in your application, that might make your application perfectly work with block. Then you have Mobex. Mobex is another great package. In fact, I have a video with the author of Mobex, 1 hour and something. We talked a pair program together on my YouTube channel, talking about Mobex and how you can get the best out of this package. And it looks like it's at least a simple package you can understand, but still it's a pattern that you need to learn. You need to learn about also different things, not just pattern. You need to learn about side effects. You need to learn about how to manage these effects and, actions and things like that. But it's a very nice package, which is going to help me to quickly maybe adapt, this package and make me productive. It's simpler to implement in the beginning. So, and it also comes with maybe code generation if you are a big fan of that. And, it looks like because it's also coming from the reactive pattern, category, must be probably something that can be very good fit for those type of application that are using stream very heavily. Then it comes to Redux, another one, my list, and it says, well, there you go. So you have a pattern, a functional, coming from the functional part, functional programming approach or pattern category. And in fact, it's a great tool if you have a team of full of developers, especially those that have been doing React Redux for some time and they are familiar with the pattern. So they're coming to the application with some knowledge, but it has some limitation for sure. Like maybe in the beginning, or even in long run, not as productive as you feel, or well, you also need to learn it, especially if you're not web developers, then you need to learn the pattern. It makes like a single source of truth and things like that. So then might not be a good fit for many, especially large applications. Maybe it's better to narrow it down to smaller or medium application. And last but not least, in my application, my list, based on the criteria that I mentioned before, is Get It Mixin. Get It by itself is just a service locator. It's helping you for dependency injection. But there is a package called Get It Mixin, which makes this a perfect choice for state management. It's simple, and it's one of those solutions that if you are a fan of not using context and not being dependent on that, you're going to do different things. You want to use like maybe even later hooks and things like that. Probably something that you're going to take a look. But looking at the package and examples and reading some codes, implementing some of, the examples, then I compared to the base, I realized, well, this is probably very simple. And that's, as the author indicated, simplicity is the key for these packages. And, it seems like very well maintained, and you can even add that to your package. The maintainability is probably going to be very high, and it's quite scalable. I have used that for big, large application, and it works pretty well. Well, now you come up with a list like this. So you have your analyze, you have all of your criterias, team drives, business, the language, everything that we mentioned. And now you have this list and you want to choose for your application what you want to use. So, well, that is the time when we say it depends. You might want to use 2, 3, 4 of these, or maybe 1 or 2 of, depends on your application. In my application, I had the Mvvm Coffee app, a few screens, a few widgets. I just wanted to do something quickly. So then I said, well, I don't want to spend time. Then simplicity is the best thing for me. And I want a package that makes me as productive as possible and as agile as possible. So, well, I really don't care about the maintainability of the package, application, because, well, I can come back to it and always refactor later if the proposal was approved, right? So in this case, then you might guess which of these solutions I chose. Tell me in the chat right now if you can guess which one I chose. That's nice. So I see some answers are coming. Well, yes, I chose set a state, to be honest, and it worked for me pretty well. I had no problem and I had no dependencies. So that was a good thing for that project. But there are other things that I want to mention right now. You always need to take into account your team when you're making a decision. So your team drive is a key here. So if your team are not really willing to choose like set a state and they want to go with review pod, let's say, or whatever else you mentioned, because of their factor, like the majority of teams are onboarded for that, you need to consider that for sure. And also always remember the project that you're working evolves, and as your solution must evolve. What does it mean? I think having a good architecture in the application, it's enabling you to refactor your state management always. So you're not really worried about you chose riverpod or block, because you can change that anytime if you have a proper architecture or a pattern in your application. As an example, one of those could be a layered architecture or pattern. So you're gonna have an infrastructure, and they're gonna have application, and you're gonna have presentation. The presentation is dealing with the UI, that's UI Flutter widgets. And that is consuming your state. You're pushing the state over there. And then application layer, well, here is the thing. That is the layer that you probably can put your state management. You take out even your business logic to another layer. Usually we can call it domain layer. In this case, you have just the state management to change the state. No business logic, nothing else. So it's a proper way to take this layer out, add another thing instead of that. So then in the beginning, I mentioned a lot of developers think that state management is the entire, solution. It's not. It's actually, in fact, to my opinion, one layer, which you can always come and refactor that if you properly have those layers in your application. I have different videos and talks about layered architecture, so you can watch out my slides later. Let's have a summary and wrap it up and maybe answer some question. So I talked about how an architect can think, and architectural thinking, what it means. We went through the state management for sure, and we chose, some criteria. We narrow it down our list and talked about, all of our states, and we added some architecture characteristic to it, unified the language between different units, and at the end, based on those investigation and those, patterns that we learned, and we had those criteria, we made a decision. So probably my last question to you would be, which one of those packages is the best one for your application? And hopefully your answer must be it depends. So, all right. I'm gonna drop my mic right now. You have access to slides at slides.com / my handler. My handler is MHADaily, and you can find me on different places. So if you have even question later, you can reach me out. And you can also access to all of my slides, including this one, on slides.com / MHADaily. If you have any question now, I'm happy. I think we have some minutes left.
Yes, we have a couple of questions. So we have one from Emil. Lots of people are recommending Riverpod. Is there a single big app that uses it?
Well, I don't know any public app, to be honest. But I know that, for example, right now in my company, we are using Riverpod, and our application is a giant application. So we're gonna have over 100 screens, and it's going to serve 6 countries in an enterprise company. So, well, that's at least one thing that I can tell you. But I don't know actually any. Well, I don't know, but probably on Riverpod you can find some examples.
Okay, one more question, maybe a side question, but also important for the architecture. What folder structure do you prefer, feature-based or layer-based separation?
That's a very good question. A very, very, very good question. I personally, well, again, I as a solution architect, I should not say I want this or that. I should say it depends. It actually really depends. But most of the time, in my applications in the last 5 years in Flutter, I chose layered, let's say, folder structure. I really like to see like presentation as a folder, and domain as a folder. However, I have one talk which is saying about domain-driven design and the strategic part and how you can apply it to Flutter. And in that one, I mentioned about the feature folder structure. The reason is that if you are building an application that you want to take out those smaller pieces, decompose them into smaller piece, which you want to use it in different also application, like you are developing one entirely invoice screen that is going to be used in different application in your company. Probably you want to go with the feature base. So in this case, it's much easier to communicate and take it out and implement it somewhere else. But if if it's only one application, probably layered, it's easier to navigate at least. That's my opinion here.
Cool. Thank you. And one last question. Have you seen Flutter apps using MVP, Mvvm, Viper, or MVC?
I have seen MVVM and MVC a lot in Flutter application. And if you search on GitHub, you will find a lot of them for sure. I'm not really sure if well, you definitely find them, but I think my preferred pattern is somehow a layered architecture. I like to have a data layer, and I like to have a model, a domain layer, and then my presentation layer. This is something that I really like, and I've done that quite a lot.
I don't think we have any questions left. Thank you, Majid. It was really cool presentation. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for having me, and I'm really, really sorry for the beginning of the event, which I messed up with some permission. I didn't. It was Chrome and Apple's fault. It wasn't me, for sure.
It was worth the wait. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then have a good day and good luck with the rest of the conf.
Thank you, Majid. You too. Bye-bye. Okay. Well, it's an honor and pleasure to present our next speaker. Of course, until Filipe is actually ready with to share his screen, I'm really honored to present him to you. He's going to tell us more about Dart microservices at Google Cloud Platform. Filipe is a great person. He's also an international speaker, community organizer at GDG Lisbon, an advocate, and an open source contributor. Not your usual software developer. He loves getting out of his comfort zone. And if you don't know where he is, he's probably organizing the next event in Portugal. He's as I already mentioned, besides being a GDG, he's also the organizer of Flutter Portugal, which lately has been advocating for the Flutter SDK by Google. Philip likes to read psychology and support the local community, always to make a social impact. And I personally know Filipe from a couple of GDG conferences that we had. I had the pleasure of visiting Portugal, and actually GDG Lisbon were the hosting GDG then. So it's really an honor to see you again and your smiling face. Thank you, Filipe. And the stage is yours.
Hey, yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for the invite. It was in a short notice, but I'm really happy to be here. And thank you, Majid, for your talk. I was listening carefully, the previous talk. Even I really recommend the book you recommended, The Fundamentals of Software Architecture. So definitely you should give it a read. Yeah, let me know when I can start, if it's okay. Let's
Yes, you are ready.
All right. So, welcome. If you're not aware, thanks to Sofia, the presentation. This talk is going to be about Dart microservices, especially with Google Cloud Platform, but we'll talk a bit more about that. Okay. So just one slide about myself, even after the big presentation from Sofia.
Sorry, Filipe, just maybe can you make the slide a little bit bigger, because we see that that it's in a tab, but it's not really in. Okay, now it's perfect. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, now it's good.
No worries, no worries. Thank you. I thought it was all right. Thank you for the warning. This will disappear. Well, yeah, it was said, I'm the community organizer of GGG Lisbon, Portugal for many years now, and now for Flutter Portugal. In Flutter Portugal, we are more focused in Portugal and advocating with the communities here. We do a lot of projects, even with the government for Flutter. We are trying to advocate Flutter in Portugal. So give us a call if you are interested in helping us. Yeah, I've been a software developer by trade for more than 10 years, even from the cupcake of Android's SDK. But now I'm always smiling. You know why? Because I'm a Flutter developer nowadays. So I'm really happy with it. So this talk is more focused for you, the Flutter developer that knows now a bit of Dart and wants to join or peek into the world of the backend and more precisely for the microservices. Okay, so from Flutter itself, we are going to grab only Dart. We only need Dart for this talk and for what we want to do. Just a heads up, if you are following through this talk, you have some requirements. You need Dart, of course, Git, Docker, it's kind of optional, and also an account in Google Clouds. You have to download the CLI command line Google Cloud SDK. It's quite easy to install. And of course, you need an account in GCP. Some APIs are paid, but fear not, there's a solution for that. This was just the intro, just to warm up a bit. This talk is going to be really just a couple of slides of why microservices and why GCP, why I picked GCP here. And then most of the talk will be around how to build a microservice with Dart Shelf. What is Shelf? We'll see it about that in a bit. So let's start. Why microservices and why GCP? First of all, a definition of a microservices. Okay, microservices is just development is a modular approach designed to improve responsiveness, flexibility, and resilience in the overall application workflow. It's a mouthful, but I think it's important because it's really the opposite of a monolith construction. You can just delegate certain functionalities, certain features to certain microservices. A microservice is specialized in one action, one feature, and so it's easily maintainable. But of course, in a whole, you might have seen the architecture of Netflix or some of Amazon. There are millions of microservices, but we are going to focus on one by one, okay? Don't worry about that. And then why GCP? Well, they're free tier, and I like to stay inside the same environment. Their free tier is more than enough for what I do with the GCP. Professionally, I work as a Flutter developer. I'm a front-end guy, but I've always tend to, in my personal projects, in some demos or some MVPs, I just try to hack something for backend when needed. And so I rely on GCP for those tasks, okay? But nowadays, there's always something similar in other competitors. So what you see here, you can replace with your favorite provider, okay? And for this talk itself, we are going to touch only two parts. We are going to talk about Cloud Run. It's really a fully managed environment to run stateless containers. Notice the stateless, and it has a free tier of 2 million requests per month. It's quite a lot. If you are just for MVP, for production might not be, but costs are quite low. And then we are going to use Artifact Registry API to deploy the image of Docker that you will see. And The free tier has only up to 500 megabytes per month, but our Docker image is really small. It's going to be 10 megabytes, something like that. So don't worry about reaching that limit. It's quite lenient. And as I promised, it was only 2 slides. I just want to jump into the good stuff. That is how to build a microservice with Dart shelf. Let's go. So why shelf? First of all, heads up, a shelf is a web server middleware, not a full-blown server framework like Django, Spring, or Express.js for those that come from Node.js. What does this mean is that the shelf, it doesn't come with the keys. You need to build up upon your project if you need to. But again, it's a nice offer. It's a nice thing to pick, because not only it's maintained by Dart team, but nowadays there aren't many other options. There were before. Some times ago, there were Aqueduct and Agile, but they stopped development for many reasons. You can read online about that. And new projects since they were open source, of course, someone else grabbed those projects and tried to continue, like Angel 3, that is an evolution of Angel, and also Conduit, that is still in active development. That is a continuation of the work done in Aqueduct, but still might not be what you need for. But then again, they come with a lot of things, but we want to work with Chef because it has this modular way of working, because you just pick what you need, you pick what you want, and you just add to your project these handlers, these add-ons. And there are quite a few that the Dart team maintains this list of packages. And of course, there are other community add-ons that community just pitch in. And so you can, or if you are even interested in contributing, it's quite easy to create new add-ons for Shelf. So here and there, you can grab what you need and create your Shelf project. Regarding the community add-ons, if you look into how many depend on Shelf itself, we have 108 packages that depend. So you might find what you need before have to implement it yourself. But let's move forward just to have this in mind, just to have in mind that Shelf is maintained by Dart team and it's modular. And for me personally, I really like that flexibility. So, okay, why Shelf is explained. So let's start a backend server, shall we? Given that I am assuming that you have Dart installed, it's quite easy to start a backend project. You simply can use the CLI of Dart create, and then -t for a certain template and the name of your project. What options you have for this -t? You have plenty of them, and you can spend a lot of time playing with it. You have the way of building a simple console application. It's helpful when you want to code some scripts. A full console application, I haven't used it that much. You have a way to start new packages, also a web server, a simple web server to just share static pages or even more dynamic web pages. But in the middle of these options, we have what we want. We have a template for a server that uses the package Shelf. So this is what we need. So to start this project, we simply do .create server shelf, and then our project name. Let's assume that we are going to use Dart_microservices for this example. When you create the project, you'll see, I'm omitting some files, but you'll see these folders and files. Instead of a lib, you might see a bin folder, you have the test folder, and then some files after it. You have this familiar to all Flutter devs, that is the pubspec YAML. And inside this pubspec YAML, you'll notice that we have this simple structure as we are used to: the name, the description, the version, and then the dependencies. The dependencies, they had it as the args. It's just to handle the arguments that are passed to the application itself. We are not going to use it per itself, but as you can see, it already added two dependencies, shelf dependency, the core shelf library, and then an add-on called shelf router. I'll talk a bit about that afterwards. And then some dev dependencies that are needed to run. But that's it. It's quite simple, the dependencies. And so let's now look into the generated server Dart that the template created for us. Now, at first, this is quite some code, isn't it? It's a bit confusing. But just to explain what it does, it's simply creating a server that will not only write hello world, but will also echo a message. Okay, and how does it do this? Well, you simply create a certain router. This router, you attach to the paths a certain path. The slash path will just say hello world /echo / a certain string will simply print out and return that message. So you have to define the router and then the path, the services, and this is how you start the server. But well, just like our counter example, app example with Flutter, you can consider this as our main starting point for shelf. So let's just dive into the rest a bit, and we'll come back here in a couple of slides. Okay. Next. Funny enough, and it's a good thing, well, at least I use a lot, when you create this template, it will already bring some Docker files that you need. Docker ignores, just to ignore some files, but more importantly, this Docker file. Some time ago, it didn't have any of this. And why now? Why does it has now? Because like now 1 year ago, something like that, we have an official Docker image for Darts. We didn't have before. Even Flutter was in production and we still didn't have an official Docker image. And lo and behold, we now have a Dart stable package that we can use and abuse and work with it. Again, this Docker file is what comes from by default. You can tweak a bit as you like, but most of the cases, this is quite enough. Going through just quickly what this does, those who are familiar with Docker file, please bear with me. Those who are not, let me just explain overall what it is doing. Yeah, it's dependent on the Dart stable official image. Here we are simply copying the codes that we have in our project into the image itself. And then what we do is run and grab all the dependencies that we need. Here, yeah, we are copying the code. We are copying creating a working directory app, copying the dependencies, everything else, getting the dependencies. Now copying the codes, okay? It will ignore Docker ignore. And then here, what we are doing is compiling the server into the machine inside the image. And then we just need some minimal requirements. This is a trick also to reduce the size of the image, and that's why we end up with a 10 megabytes image size, which is great. And then in the end, we just say, okay, open the port 8080, that is what was defined in the code that we seen before, and we run the server that is compiled here. Okay, just a bit of explanation. It's important if you are going to look into this. Okay. Moreover, and finally, and this is the README. This talk could be a README. I'll be honest. It could be a simple email, but I'm here also to answer your questions and try to guide you through this process. So what's inside the README? Well, how to run this project? You can simply run the templates, and then you have a way to run that server, edit it, and make it as you please, and use curl or even your browser to look into it. But what we are going to do here is grab this template, and adapted to our needs. Okay, we are going to tweak it a bit. We are not going to create a full RESTful application. It's just going to be, like I said, a small microservice. So let's mess with the code a bit, shall we? Let's go into it. So, like I said, now we are back to the server.dart that we started seeing, and this is quite a lot, isn't it? It's just 31 lines of code, but in my opinion, this is quite a lot for what it does. So we can do better. Okay, we can do better with this. We can add handlers, also known as shelf add-ons. So one thing we need to do is also add our famous build runner, because we are going to use it to generate some codes. And you can assume now, from now on, from this start on, that you can assume that I have the .run builder watch delete all dependencies, overriding dependencies in the background. Okay, let's assume that this is always running. It's always preparing our files. Okay, so next step. Given we have the build runner, we are going to add this package, this add-on called shelf router generator. So, and why is this? Because we are going to grab this and replace with something else, something more easier for us to understand. We are going to replace really by a class, okay? A class, in this case, I call services. You can call it whatever you want. And this gives us way more flexibility than what we had before. Okay, we have still the path of echo the message, does the same thing. It also prints the hello world when you do the slash. But if you look carefully, we have other parameters here. While the previous command, you will only work with hello world when you added a slash, here we are telling the path that it can be ignored, it can be anything, any text, and it will output the hello world. However, if the server grabs something full path slash echo and a message, it will print out back that message. So, and then everything else, it's like a catch all, and then it will print hello world. This is a nice example if you needed to just reply not found, or a static page saying 404. This is normally how you do it, okay? It's just a small example. And of course, we can this way have a more simpler main function that we simply create an instance of the service that we define here, and the server, we can simply say, okay, service handler, localhost 800, and just a message of printing this out. And given that we have this class away, we can move it into its own file, and we then have more cleaner function with the server, and this is more like it, don't you think? And so we can organize your projects way better and have less code to see. And of course, it's thanks to the build runner and the way it generates. So here is just for me to show that we printed out, we moved the service class into a new folder file. And this is just the generated code, okay? And you might see it's quite familiar with something else, with the configured routes, right? So we reduce that into the service router, which is because it's important for you to understand what's going on. At least it's my opinion, to understand what's going on in the stages, go step by step. And as soon as you understand well all these concepts and what is going on, we can evolve into using other functionalities. And like so, we just grab all these initial codes into a simple main function. This is really cool. Okay, so this is just 2 add-ons, but if you wanted to add more, if you wanted to offer a static page, if you needed to offer even needed a course, you just add more and more handlers, more add-ons, and that will be it. Good, pretty awesome, isn't it? So this was the introduction for how to build a microservice. This microservice is kind of dumb, but it serves its purpose. It serves its purpose for us to try it out and how to deploy this. So let's deploy this already. But before, let's make the exercise a bit more interesting. Okay, let's just change things a bit. So in the service.dart in the class, let's change this a bit into something else. Let's change the class service to a class service that has a counter. You know where I'm going to with it. We are going to add a path saying add, a path saying counter, and then we are going to catch all the other calls, get calls, and reply to not found, nothing to see here. Okay, and this functionality, well, we now have a microservice that simply, and be mindful that this is a stateless. It's going to be a stateless server. So as soon as you quit the server, you will reset this counter, just like an app, And if you want to persist, a microservice will simply do is delegate that responsibility to someone else. You can simply say that. And the goal of this microservice is to do one thing and one thing only, is to add the counter. And that's what we are doing here. Whenever there's a call to the adds, it will increase the counter, reply to added, and if you call the service with /counter, it will return just a message, not a JSON. It's a string message saying counter and the value of the counter. Quite cool, isn't it? So with this change, let's continue. Okay. So how to deploy to Cloud Run? Interestingly enough, if you go to the official documentation, you might see examples for Python, for other languages, but for Cloud Run, unless at least from last time I checked, it didn't have a proper documentation for Dart. So in the end, I'm here to just tell you it's more easy than it looks, and let's go through it step by step. Okay. The first step is, what is a Cloud Run, right? Cloud Run is simply a way of auto-increment and auto-service microservice or a certain deployed functionality. And it's auto-scalable, it's ephemeral, like I've said. So as soon as you stop the Cloud Run, it will reset everything. The machine is deleted, and it will only call back afterwards. And if you need a more persistent way, there are other hosts and even VM instances that you can use inside the GCP Google Cloud Platform. But let's focus on the Cloud Run because it's quite fun. And for Cloud Run, we have this notion of we are going to deploy with a Docker image. Okay, we are not going to build from source code. We are going to use an image. This container image. This case is going to be Docker, and we are going to upload that image to Google GCP artifacts registry. Okay, why is this? Because as soon as the service of Cloud Run can stop, it knows where to get the new instance. It knows what to run again, and it's quite easy. And as soon as we have the image uploaded to Artifacts Registry, we are ready to deploy that image to the Cloud Run. There are other ways to do this, but let's focus on these two steps, shall we? So let's start with the upload of the container image to the Artifact Registry. Well, first of all, you need a Docker image, right? And to tag that image. To create the Docker image, as we've seen in the code, we already have a Docker file. What we do, and pay attention, you need to have Docker running on your local machine or on the server that you are trying to run. You simply construct your image through this command that you see here. The -t, it's the name of the image, so bear with me. And then, given the image is constructed and built and in the same folder, what you do is you are going to tag this image with a certain name. What name is this, you ask? Well, this name is to GCP understand what to do with the image, okay? And for, with this, we say, okay, we have the image. Remember, we in the final path, what we use is counter server, the same name of the image. We say docker tag counter server, that is, it's this one, latest, so it's latest version of the image. And then we have to use the same name, just also for our brain cells to be easier to understand. And of course, there are other things like this EU GCR-.io. You could use only GCR.io, but that means that the image will be deployed to the USA servers. When you prefix it with EU, it means it will be deployed in Europe. So, but if you would like to know more, in the documentation, there's more information about it. Okay, there's also other instances. What is the project ID? Well, when you create a project in the Google Cloud Platform, it will give you a unique ID, and this project ID, and this is where you will put your project ID in, okay? So just to recap really quickly, you build the image with a certain name, and then you tag that image with a certain structure, okay? So that the Docker, the GCP knows what to do with it. So with that said, now we need to upload that image to the registry, in this case, the GCP. And for that, I'm also assuming that you have a gcloud CLI installed on your machine, logged in, and with the APIs already checked. Okay, I'm assuming a lot of things just to simplify everything. And with this said, you simply run these commands that say, okay, let's deploy the image, tag image that I've mentioned. Don't forget, you need to replace this project ID with your own project ID. And you say, okay, let's submit this tag into the Artifactory. And that's it. You have your image now remote in this the cloud. How awesome is that? And to then deploy that image that is in the Artifactory's registry to the Cloud Run and start running, well, it's also direct. You can define a certain name for the Cloud Run. Pay attention here that we now are using dashes instead of underscores because of the name conventions that you can only use alphanumeric and dashes for Google Run services. So with this in mind, we can run the following command line. Just say gcloud run deploy, your service name, your Cloud Run, Google Run service name, and you say, mention what is your image that you want to deploy, and then allow unauthenticated. I don't advise you to leave this. It's just for demo purpose, okay? It's always preferable to have authentication in place, but let's assume that it's a public microservices and that you want everyone to access. And yeah, without this mess, this last parameter, it's just, yeah, you use Google Cloud, gcloud run deploy, and then the image that you want to deploy, because the image is already in the Artifactory registry. And to just make things shorter, and if you deploy at first time and you want to update your project, you made some changes to your microservice, well, you just have to run again the project and do, maybe even as I do usually, I just add this to a bash script, or even if you are crazy like I am, you can create a CLI Dart command line that will automate this for you. You just run a command line and it will rebuild the image locally of your Docker image, because it needs to grab all the new codes. It will tag the latest this is wrong, but you'll tag the new image just to submit it again. You know, it's already tagged like we had before the latest, you remember? So we just have to submit again the image. It's smarter than we are, and then deploy it again. So after you deploy it first and everything is green, you just need to repeat the steps over and over again to update the service. Quite easy, isn't it? All of this was a mouthful, a lot of lines of codes, but I'll make these slides available so you can follow through the this installation. I wanted to motivate you, Flutter developers, to do not be afraid to try out Google Run or other solutions like similar like this, because they can be quite handy if you are trying to teach someone, if you are trying to create an MVP. And Google Run really releases you from trying to maintain and evolve or have a scalable product. So it can be really powerful, because it's really powerful from codes to production, right? As you've seen, I created a counter app online, and it's production ready. If I wanted to, I could share that. Even if you participated in the latest challenge of Flutter Challenge, you could have used this for your project. Who knows? And with the free tier, it gives you a lot of flexibility, and you can do it without the need of using Firebase. Sorry, last speaker, but you could be more independent. But bear in mind, with this talk, I didn't mention about security. I didn't mention about how to persist the data, because as soon as the Cloud Run machine turns off, it's back to zero, okay? And I also didn't mention how microservice architecture works. But then again, the fundamentals of software architecture that was mentioned before, it's a good book. They have a section all about the microservices, so it's quite fun to read about it. I will also leave with you some resources. You can take a screenshot if you want to see it immediately. And in the end, there's a small package that was prepared by Dart team itself. It's a package for you to create functions with the Dart codes. You know, if you are familiar with the Cloud Functions, and you are interested in using Dart to create Cloud Functions, I will advise you to look into that package. And what's the difference between a cloud function and a microservices? Well, the function is usually just one method, one action, while a microservice can be many other things, can have authentication, can have multiple paths, it can have more logic around it. But again, it's way less than a RESTful application that relies and reads from the database directly, has many other things and persisting data than microservices, okay? So it's a bit tricky, but it's a really interesting package if you want to just create a quick function. And functions together with the Cloud Run, it's really cool. And I hope that you liked it. So before I continue, Sofia, do we have time for a small demo, just to show out a bit?
Yeah, why not?
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So it's really quickly, I'm going to stop sharing this and share this screen. Let me remove this from here. So what I have here is just a small app that will, if I can bring up, here is the codes. What I have here, big font for you to see, is what I show you in the presentation. Okay, it's just a server that has that starts the server and then offers it, and then has these endpoints that you want to use. Okay, and with this, I'm going just to run that spin server. I'm going to grab just a browser here, and now that is running on localhost. If I run nothing to see here, and remember how I mentioned the catch-all. This is working, quite helpful. However, if I write correctly first, counter, you'll see counter. And if I do localhost add, something was added. Refresh this page, refresh. I will continue just add, refresh, and then you can see that I loaded the page 6 times. What happens, imagine this is the server called run. If I stop the server and start again, you will see that the counter is reset to 0. This is the stateless version of it. If the microservice wanted to persist the data, you needed to implement something else. Okay, and so, and this code I wanted also to show you. Of course, it has the usual files, the Docker file, and the Docker file. So you know that I'm not saying any lies. This takes only 11. Okay, it's 11 megabytes of image size. So compared with, since we have 500 megabytes in the registry, and even so, it's something I like to use. You can just push directly from your code or even GitHub directly to Google Cloud Run. But I like to persist and have this image somewhere. And yeah, and a small, just quick example, the Dart functions. It's the library that I mentioned, the function framework. If you wanted to create a simple cloud function, it's as simple as this, right? And if you've used the cloud functions of Firebase functions, instead of using JavaScript, you can simply use that. Why not? Deploy it to a Cloud Run, and then you have it. You have up to 2 million requests of hello world, many hello worlds per se. But yeah, that's it from me. Let me just share again back my slides. If I'm not doing this, it disappears. Share screen, window, and where's my I close my slides. Yeah, that's it from me. I hope that you enjoy it. I'm not going to take.
Well, he dropped for some reason, somehow. I think he closed the wrong window. Anyway, I think that we, once he's back, we'll be able to answer your questions, Zwati. In the meantime, I will give access to our next speakers, Neil and Lazar. And Filipe, yeah, you dropped, but can you some questions first before you go? Just unmute. So
Hello.
sorry, you closed the wrong window, right?
No, it turned off. My laptop just logged off. I don't know what happened.
Okay, so have you compared Cloud Run services written in Dart versus written in JavaScript, for example, in terms of performance, memory, and CPU usage, response time? And are there decent ORM for shelf?
Okay, the two parts. I haven't compared with JavaScript. don't have put benchmarks about that, but there are some websites that does that. Okay, I can share afterwards. If you follow me on Twitter, I can share more resources for that. And moreover, I'm not going to code in JavaScript. I know how to code in JavaScript, but I prefer to use Darts that I'm more used to. So if I'm not going to do it in JavaScript, I'll do it in JavaScript and Dart. So I don't care about comparisons. Regarding the ORMs, well, you can simply use some existing ones that I can remember now. You can use even Izar out there that there is. You can use MongoDB libraries. When you go to pub.dev and you find that that package is available for Dart itself, that means you can have it on the server, which is awesome. You don't really need an ORM when you can have the package directly. So look into it. It's quite fun.
Cool. And is there any way to test those services locally?
Yeah, you can use the test. Even the template creates some tests for you. Just create some unit tests. You can create, or even when I ran here locally, you can simply see if it's working and quite direct. And please add tests.
Thank you, Filipe. it was pleasure to have you for our first Flutter event. I hope the guys enjoyed the presentation. I really loved it, and yeah, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Okay.
Peace.
Cheers.
Yeah, obrigada. See you.
Ciao.
Bye. Okay, so it's time for our last session tonight. So thank you, Lazar and Emil, for tuning in such short. These two awesome guys are from Tide, and they have years and years of experience with technologies ranging from Kotlin, Java, C# to now, and all kinds of other awesome stuff. I'm not. Their biographies are quite impressive, but I'm gonna let them present themselves and the topic that they're going to talk about, which is code generation on enterprise level. Guys, the floor is yours.
Hello, hello everyone. I'm Lazar. I'm an Android developer originally, with 9, maybe 10 years. And I'm working for Tide at the moment. This is just a short, brief intro. Emil?
Hello, good afternoon, good evening from me as well. I'm Emil. I'm working for Tide for quite a while now, with some decent experience, maybe 6 or 7 years, mainly on the mobile world for now. And as well, maybe you can start with our presentation now.
Yeah, first, really great presentations today. We will try to keep the level, and I'm sharing. Okay, is the window big enough?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, it's full screen.
Okay, so today we'll talk about code generation and how it helps us building enterprise software. Before that, it's going to be useful if you have some context of our company, because you better see our problem later on. So we started in 2017, and the first product came in January of that year. We are focused on the UK market, where we have more than 400,000 members. And it's a banking app, but not only. Our customers can basically outsource their business, financial, administrative needs to us, and they can focus on their business. I mean, nobody wants to do accounting, right? And we cover services like invoicing, expensing, accounting, credit, company formation, payroll, and others. Let's not bore you with this information more. Let's talk about our Flutter journey. Even though we had to complete Android and Android and iOS native apps, like complete with all the features that our customers needed, we decided to migrate to Flutter because we wanted the productivity boost that it offers. Write the code one, use in iOS, Android, and web. And I can tell you a little bit my experience, because as I said, I had 9, maybe 10 years of experience. I'm a senior developer for some. But this year, I'm a junior Flutter developer. I started with Flutter 3 months ago, and it's been an interesting journey. I was frustrated in the beginning with not being able to excel with creating software. But if you want to be good at something, you first have to allow yourself to be bad at it. And I'm saying this to the people who are still thinking if Flutter is ready for the big companies. It is, people, so you can start learning it. And I think, Emil, you had also an interesting journey, and you started before me. You want to say a word about it?
Sure. So, as you said, I started a little bit earlier. I actually started practicing Flutter like a year ago, or a little bit less than a year ago. And in the beginning, I was kind of afraid what's actually happening, because I didn't know how the framework actually worked out. But after a while, or like a few weeks, I've started to look at the documentation along with articles, lots of videos. And it turned out that it's not so frightening at all, and you just need a couple of weeks in order to get ready with Flutter and even start typing or even release an app into the stores. So the only thing, or maybe the main motivation for me back then was that I was really interested in learning a new language or framework that could easily allow me to distribute projects for different platforms. And I guess Flutter is one of the best one on the market for that, because come on, you can build apps for mobile platforms like iOS and Android. You have web, you have Windows and Windows now. What else would you need? So
maybe embedded. Who knows?
Well, who knows? That might be the next step.
Yeah. As I said, I was a junior developer in the beginning of the year. Maybe I'm already middle level. Probably next month I'll be senior. But enough with our journeys. Let's tell you the company journey. And it's been a story of mistakes and many lessons learned. So let me share one of these lessons. I'm actually really glad that Majid's presentation came before ours, because it's related in a way. Only this example, though. So the initial project, as I said, we had native apps, and the initial project, the Greenfield Flutter project, the migration from native to Flutter, was initially started by a couple of Android developers. Android developers use usually Mvvm and MVP for presentation layer state management. So if you can suggest what they started the project with in the chat, probably you're not gonna learn an award, but I'm gonna congratulate you. Any suggestions in the chat? So it's having in mind that it's 3 people. The project has been just started. It started 2 years ago, and they're Android developers. Any suggestions? Okay, no says that. No, but it's a good suggestion. I'm sure they've tried it really fast, but actually they continued with MVVMP, which is the hybrid version of MVM and MVP. It stands for Model View Model Presenter. And if you've seen Majid's presentation, he didn't mention anything about that. And this isn't suggested by the Flutter docs on how to do state management. And basically, there was no community, and there weren't many examples on how to do it. And although this wasn't a problem for the Android developers, some people had to adapt to it once they joined the project.
Just here, can you ask an iOS engineer how to work on MVVMP on a Flutter project? It's quite hard for us.
Yeah, you're not used to it, of course.
Yeah.
So having realized the problem, and as the project scaled, more people joined, we experimented a little with Riverpod until finally setting on block, as it scaled perfectly for us and for our project. And a lot of time has passed since we started the Flutter project. At the moment, we have around 40 Flutter developers. Most of them were the people that created the old native apps, which is good because these are the people with the business knowledge. And when migrating from one platform to another, there are 2 things, the business knowledge and the technology knowledge. And the technology knowledge came from 2 amazing Flutter GDs that really helped us get up to speed with the architecture tooling and the best practices. And we've gathered a lot of best practices as we experimented and as we had many lessons learned. We built a solid structure for our software so that it can scale without problems. And imagine we have cookbooks on how to do basically anything inside of our app. We have a cookbook on how to use our architecture. We have a cookbook on how to use the design system or the UI kit, how to generate assets, how to write BDD tests, how the package management is done, what style we use, and many, many, many others. And although things might seem perfect at this point of time, it was another quick realization that people who are new to the project feel overwhelmed with all the guidelines and rules that we've created. And I'm gonna elaborate more why this is a problem. This is the structure that we use for our project. We have, maybe you've seen most of these folders inside of your projects. Basically, on the high level, we have DI folder, we have source folder, assets, dependencies. Not only folders, there are base classes and configurations for these folders. In the sources, we have a feature or many features. And because we follow clean architecture as app architecture, this is said in regards to something that Majid said, that people don't differ between app architecture and presentation layer, state management, and patterns. For the features, we use clean architecture, and that's why we have the data domain presentation layer separation with their own classes inside, like services, use cases, repositories, and all the block classes inside of the presentation folder. You can also find tests, navigation, and localization files and folders. So this is the structure that we use for packages. Just imagine having to create this from the zero without something to generate it for you. It's quite painful, and it's prone to errors. Somebody might use different libraries, different structure. We didn't want that, and we didn't want it because we have more than 100 packages. The reason for that is, as I said, we are 40 developers. And in order to avoid merge conflicts and people working on code that is not familiar, that they are not familiar with, we decided to split our app into different micro frontends. Just imagine different teams having different responsibilities. Let's say that one team is responsible for invoicing, the other one is responsible for onboarding people onto the app. And these teams, each one of them is responsible for some packages, not only one. Probably these packages will double in a year. So as you might start seeing the problem, we needed somehow to give the people to generate that, because mostly the difference, to be honest, are just names here for the different features. And after a short search, we found a solution. It's called Mason. It comes from the people who created the blog, Felix Angiov. He's a Bulgarian. And I'm going to give the word to my colleague Emil, who is quite good with Mason. He's going to show you how we generate code from templates. And thank you. Emil?
Thank you, Lazar. So maybe you can jump to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. So before we start with a little bit more complex stuff, let me just first introduce what actually Mason is. Mason is an open source tool that generates code from custom templates that usually engineers code and bricks. You can think of a brick like a small reusable component that you can reuse everywhere in your app. For example, take a look on the screenshot on the right. That's That's a quite simple widget we have here that I'm sure most of you have seen like a dozen times, and you have reused that widget lots of times. Most of the times you just do that by copy and paste it from here to there, and it's just annoying. Well, here's maybe the time to make a shout out to Felix as well. And if you go back for a second, make sure to check out the Mason Cli documentation in pub.dev. It's really awesome, and it will help you to reduce that amount of boilerplate code that every big team used to have. And what also this does for you is something that one of the previous speakers said in his talk. This actually saves time and budget for the company, so that's important as well. So next slide. Okay, so now we have some kind of a picture of what actually is a brick or a template. How actually we can do that? Well, looking at the previous example, and now I can really easily translate it into a template. Pretty much the template is using the Mason is using the mustache syntax. Along with the mustache syntax, you can see those some Pascal case curly brackets. Those are built-in supported lambdas that can help you to customize the generated code, so that the next time you want to reuse this template, you can simply just type Mason make and provide the name and provide the input for your brick, and then Mason will generate a new file with the content that it has inside it. This way you can easily make the bricks a little bit more dynamic and reuse them everywhere in your project. But don't get me wrong, Mason is not only about that. Mason can help you with different type of files. Mason is able to generate any type of files. The size of those files is unlimited, so you can fill them with whatever you want. The content doesn't matter, and it's language agnostic. So it can be a Swift file, a Java file, it can be Dart file. It doesn't matter for him, for Mason. But enough of talking here. Instead, what I would suggest is maybe I can show a small demo of how you can use Mason in an actual example. Okay, so let's begin. First of all, let's see what actually Mason provides for us. Once you install Mason from, if you're using Mac, from Homebrew, install it in your machine, you can use Dart in order to install it using Dart pub install. All right, so it provides a few commands, but I won't go one by one and just name and explain what each one of them does. Instead, I'll maybe mention the most important of them. For example, once you initialize Mason on your machine, the first thing you maybe want to do is check whether there are any templates or any bricks that were generated for free for you. Well, in order to do that, you can simply just type Mason list. Well, in my example, I have a few bricks generated already, and I'm going to show each one of them one by one. What you can see, however, on the top of my screen is the Mason YAML file. You can find this YAML file inside the root directory of the Mason folder, and it contains all of the bricks that you have created. For example, if I want to create another Mason brick, what I need to do is simply just let me just increase a little bit this fella here. What I need to do, I just need to go Mason new and enter the name of my new brick. Let's say temp brick. And here we have it. Now I have a new temp brick. Well, let's see what actually this brick contains inside it, so that we can have a better understanding how Mason actually works under the hood. I'll ignore the README for now. Oops, let me just close that. Like that. The README for now. It's quite straightforward, and my suggestion will be make sure to have a README file in every brick that you define, so that it will be easier for other engineers to understand how they can properly use that brick. But let's keep going. Brick YAML is the entry point for your brick or for your template. You can think of it like a pubspec YAML file for your package. So I guess most of the engineers can understand what's the purpose or how important this file for you might be. But pretty much it defines it just defines a few properties for your brick, like the name, gives a brief description, a version of it, and one of the most important things is the variables on the bottom. So Mason supports 3 types of variables: Boolean, strings, and numbers, and you can use them as an input for your templates, so that you can make them a little bit more dynamic. But how can we use them, by the way? In order to look what actually Mason does for us, you need to jump into the brick directory, and the very simple template that is generated every time you create a new brick is a hello MD. And again, you can see that mustache syntax that simply whenever you want to create a component from that brick, it will generate a hello MD file printing hello with the name that you entered from the input that's defined in the PubSpec YAML. Okay, that's good, but what's the usage of it? And how can we use that in Flutter or in our projects? Well, in the beginning of my talk, I started with the reusable components. So one of the first cases where we can use Mason is to generate reusable components or small classes that instead of copy and pasting, you can generate them with a dynamic input. Okay, but how can we do that? I'll switch to my another project. That's a simple Flutter sample project that I've created for the purpose of that presentation here. And if you see, I'm in the same directory, so typing Mason list provides me with the same bricks. Great. So what we can do here, as I said in the beginning, Mason provides a bunch of commands. What we're actually interested here is to generate code using an existing brick. How can we do it, by the way? Just simply say Mason make widget, and I need to provide the output directory or the output path for the file that I want to generate. In my example, that's the Mason sample test, and inside I want to go inside the lib directory, and I want to generate a file here. I just want to enter a name. Let's say I want a login widget, and done. Let's see. It created a login file for me. That's actually a login stateless widget, and we've implemented pretty simple build function. So actually, I can even use that in my main now, and just to see what actually see that the app works or it's building. Okay, but that's not sufficient for me. I want a little bit more. If you followed what Lazar said in the beginning or in the middle of his speak, he said that we decided that maybe a good approach for us could be to use block pattern for state management solution. Okay, so what we can do, I'm just going to type Mason list again. And if you see my the first brick is actually Mason block. So Mason make block, provide the path again. And again, let's keep it in the library. And let's call it again login. Cool. Let's see what generated for me this time. So this time it generated, oops, sorry, I've entered the wrong output directory. I forgot to add the command. Login. Cool. So what generated this time? This time Mason generated a block class along with state and event. So, but if you look closely, you see that there are some compilation errors here. Let's take a look. Looks like the generated classes actually have freeze annotation. For those of you that are aware, this means that I'm using freeze to generate even more code. So if you get the sense here, we are using Mason to generate code, and this code generates another bunch of code, and so you're getting the recursion there. So what we can do here, simply I'm going to switch to my second terminal and just trigger the build runner. The build runner takes a while, but in the end it will generate the freeze file that will simply resolve all of the issues. And now, again, I have a fully functional logging block class that I can use in my project. And it took me like less than a minute to generate that. If I had to type everything manually, it could take me like maybe about 10 minutes. So it's save time for me. Okay, but going back to Lazar's talk, that's still not sufficient for me. It's still not enough. Why is the reason, you might ask here? Well, clearly, we're quite a big team, around 40 engineers at the moment. So imagine working in such a team into a single package. Well, you will maybe need to have a dedicated engineer of pain that will constantly will be constantly resolving merge conflicts, and that's just impossible for us to work. It's going to be a huge bottleneck. So what we're actually doing here is we decided to split the app into multiple areas. So, and this way we split the team as well. So now instead of having a single package, you might have, I don't know, more than 100 packages or more than 200 packages. That's great. But with so many packages, you want to follow given style guides, and you want to follow cookbooks, how to create those packages, what should be the folder structure inside, what should be, how should all of the files be named inside, what should be this, how should you name the constants inside, how should you resolve all of the dependencies there. So you're getting it, right? It's just insane. It's too much work, and it's just going to repeat over and over again in the next package, in the next one. So that's just a lot of potential, a lot of time wasted, and there is actually a way for us to resolve that, and it's called Mason. So going back to the terminal again, typing Mason list, what I can do is create a Flutter package, and I'm going to provide again the directory. This time I want to make sure that the packages are in the root directory, packages, and I want to move it inside. Okay, I want to have a login package, and done. What actually Mason generated for me is a almost fully functional package that has a pubspec, oops, not the outlook, yes, a pubspec YAML file, which contains all of the dependencies for me resolved automatically. And even if you have some domain packages or services that on which most of your feature packages or your micro frontends depend, you can add them here so that it's even more work safe for you. Going inside the lib directory, you can see again the very same structure, having a block with the block classes, a main login page that is just going to be the entry point for the block maybe, or something else. And last but not least, here is a test directory that you might maybe find interesting, but you can generate tests as well. And as Lazar said, you can generate lots of other stuff, but that's just the starting point. And that's just generating packages with blocks inside. Maybe you don't need blocks. Maybe you use Riverpod. Well, you can do the same trick there as well. You can generate packages with Riverpod with view models and providers. Doesn't matter. The main idea here is just use Mason in order to make your life a little bit easier and spend the rest of more of your time on implementing the actual behavior of the feature, and not styling and ordering files and ordering the file structure of your package. Well, that's pretty much from my side, at least for now, for the demo. Thank you, everyone, and hope you enjoyed the presentation. And now the floor is yours if you have any questions.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, we have a couple of questions. Is Mason for Flutter only?
Okay, I can take this one. Flutter, it's not for Flutter only. At the moment, it can be installed through Dart, but for Mac, also you can install it through Brew. Later on, they will add it with Chocolatey and other package managers for Windows as well. But you can basically generate anything, not only Flutter code. We're just using it with this purpose. And it was created within the Flutter communities. That's why it's popular with Flutter.
Okay, a couple of more questions now. How do you manage the Mason templates?
Emo, you want to take this one, or I can do it?
Sure. So there are a couple of ways you can maintain or manage the bricks defined in your Mason. One of them is you can have a remote repository that's related only for bricks. Mason, one of the commands that Mason has, or that Mason has as availability, is to add remote bricks from GitHub repositories. Another one could be you can store your bricks inside your repository along with your project. Just make sure to move them away from the root directory of the project, maybe one directory behind it, so that the analysis options and the linter don't start to complain that it can't resolve those the identifiers there. And last but not least option, that's something quite new that it was introduced like a week ago. It's called brickhub.dev, and that's a shared hub or repository for bricks created by the author of Mason. And inside, I guess Felix created it just to allow engineers to share their own bricks with the community. So that's why instead of inventing the wheel your own, you can take a given brick from there and use it in your own project. And if you go there, you will see that currently there are a couple bricks already defined, but they're just for examples, I guess. And I guess that in future there will be a lot more bricks uploaded in the BrickHub repository, and I just can't wait to see what people are actually using Mason for.
Great. And one last question. Do you still use a lot of platform code, or most of your application is completely in Flutter, considering that you have many seasoned native developers in your team?
Oh, good question, actually. Basically, we had two native apps, and we still have them. And also, we have a Flutter app that almost all developers moved to this Flutter app. It's a greenfield. There is no Android or iOS code apart from the usual things. And the native apps are in maintenance mode, and all the development happens for the Flutter app. Basically, we became Flutter front-end company. We also have web Angular, but it's another topic. I'm sure that someday this will become Flutter as well.
Can't wait for that.
Great. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Really great talk. And we actually finished on time, despite the fact that that we were so late and we had some technical difficulties in the beginning. So we are now done with the sessions. I'm almost ready to let you all go and have a nice rest of the evening. But there's just like only 5 people that ask questions, so I'm glad to say that all 5 will receive something from us. So just maybe I'll reach out to you in DMs. Close the session, so just stay tuned for a little bit longer. You'll also receive a link to our feedback form. Please be so kind to fill it out and let us know how you felt about the event today and what else you would like to hear as content in the upcoming events at GDG Sofia. And yes, thank you so much, everyone. Have a nice evening.
Have a nice evening. Thank you for having us. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.